Hello everyone, this is Dawn Parr with Queen's University. For my inquiry project, I've chosen to evaluate the dialectics of the acclaimed 2006 film Half Nelson. Does art imitate life? Does life imitate art? Communication ethics theoretical themes found in literature and film both mirror life and influence life in the face of real dilemmas. This cycle creates dramas that reoccur over time and across diverse settings. The practice of communication involves a continual negotiation of tensions between opposing values and principles, involving individuals faced with ethical dilemmas must make choices of how to proceed in any given circumstance, and often these decisions are based on comparisons of divergent perspectives. When moral decisions are black and white, knowing what to do is easy. Individuals may not live up to their convictions all the time, but they know what they ought to do. For this inquiry project, I explore pedagogical communication ethics problems situated in the dialectics of direction and change found in the acclaimed film Half Nelson. For the analysis, I apply dialogic ethics theory. I analyze Half Nelson as a humanities case study to engage and apply what Arnett, Hardin, Fritz, and Bell call metaphors of communication ethics practice. The teacher is no longer merely the one who teaches, but one who himself is taught by the dialogue with his students, who in turn, while being taught, also teach. They become jointly responsible for a process in which all grow. In the examination of the film Half Nelson, a prominent underlying theme that emerged was pedagogical communication ethics. The tension between the internal competing goods for the main character, Dan Dunn, faces in his good intentions for his students and his need for drugs form the basis of the narrative of the film Half Nelson. Dan's actions and his ethical decisions that he makes not only shape his own path in life, but that of the characters around him. Pedagogical communication ethics considers an awareness of the right and wrong path to take in regard to teaching students. It requires what instructors actively think about. They need to question their own practices in the classroom, be aware of the possible strategies for engagement, and actively choose the methods that best fit their goals and topics. Pedagogical communication ethics also refers to the establishment of boundaries, especially between work life as it pertains to interaction with students and the instructor's personal life, and most critical of all, making sure students are aware and understand those boundaries. For the analysis of the film Half Nelson, I applied dialogic ethics theory as a theoretical framework. Dialogue between individuals promotes the discovery of the other's point of view. This promotes flexibility as opposed to stringent, unforgiving truth for which one's own good is interpreted by. Dialogic communication ethics requires individuals to stand on their own ground while being open to the other's standpoint and recognizes the importance of meaning that emerges in discourse, acknowledging multiple goods that become apparent during conversations. What is dialectics? Dialectics is a discussion of reasoning by dialogue, used as an approach of intellectual investigation. The dialectical method is discourse between two or more people holding different points of view about a subject who wish to establish the truth of the matter guided by reasoned arguments. A closer look at the controversial film. Initially, the storyline of Half Nelson sounds like one of Hollywood's most tired plot lines, the one where the inspirational teacher changes the lives of the inner city students and learns a few things about himself along the way. At first, we think that this movie is going to follow in line with the familiar teacher-savior genre films. However, a few moments into the film, it's clear this is an entirely different kind of story. Half Nelson is about an 8th grade history teacher struggling to make the subject relevant to his students at a troubled school in crime-ridden Brooklyn. The teacher, Dan Dunn, played by Ryan Gosling, endeavors to connect with his students at an intellectual level. His weakness is his cocaine addiction. Drug abuse and drugs in general are both crucial elements to the plot. This is made quite clear early on in the movie in one of the most powerful scenes, the one that sets the coordinates for the rest of the narrative. Intriguing themes found in Half Nelson. The movie portrays the struggles of drug abuse, the demise of idealism as a lifestyle, and the perception of hopelessness for life in general, all three of which are themes evident throughout the movie. It was filmed in a realist style, using uncomfortable close-ups, tight angles, and unsteady camera. As a viewer, you are drawn in because of the intensity portrayed by the characters, particularly in some of the pivotal scenes. It's real. It could be described in short: teacher has a problem, student discovers the secret, and two lives intertwine. But this film is so much more. Dan is discovered. The pivotal scene described below happens moments after a girls' basketball game that Dan had coached, when he does a check of the girls' locker room to see if anyone's still there. Finding it empty, he goes into the bathroom stall and lights up his crack pipe. At some point, Dan, very high and semi-conscious, hears someone in the next stall. Hears the toilet flush and hears a girl's voice. His student, Dre, walks in on him, cowering in the bathroom stall with crack vial still in hand. In this scene, the confrontation is memorable, with much focus on their facial expressions. The discomfort shown by Dan is incredibly obvious, as well as the uncertainty revealed by Dre. The first of many boundaries have been crossed. The confusion in their roles builds as Dre wipes Dan's forehead with a paper towel. Dan's pedagogical style. The film hits sensitive nerves about teaching, race, inspiration, and relationships. As for the pedagogical figure of Dan, although his personal life is careening downward, his teaching is inspired, it's brilliant, it's dedicated. Half Nelson does not offer a one-dimensional representation of an educator who is an unquestionable figure of moral authority. For example, by applying that dialogic theory, it is uncovered that he teaches his students with dialectics to make it both easily understood and a profound tool to promote change. Through the analysis of these pivotal scenes, it is also revealed that Dan's pedagogical style is both dialogic and critical in nature. What is history? With that simple question addressed to the students, he opens up a dialogue in the classroom. Dan illustrates the first law of dialectics by explaining what a history is over the change of time. And he asks, what is change? Answering his own question, he presses his fists against one another and says, it's this, it's opposites. Two things that push against each other in opposite directions. He uses the example of civil rights movement as essentially opposing mentalities and states in the South, majority believe that all men are not created equal, and their minority who believe that they were. So that minority struggles and it fights and it pushes till eventually it becomes the majority. Not only is this scene a significant example of dialectics, it is also representative of the dialogic approach that Dan takes in his teaching of his students. In the end, with the final scene in the film, one can only hope that characters may move from despair into lives which may give them a sense of hope and finally a chance, as with the lessons of history, to move beyond their unhappy past into a brighter and more rewarding future. Dialectics abound in the film Half Nelson. As exhibited earlier on in the analysis of the film, dialectics was intricately woven throughout the narrative. It was transparently included in the main pedagogical scenes between Dan and his students as he goes in great dialogue with them in regards to history, opposites, turning points, as well as negation of negation. In addition, dialectics was also symbolically represented in the interpersonal relationships between Dan and Dre, as well as other characters. Finally, nuances of dialectics were uncovered in the portrayal of the main character's personality. For example, in the duality of Dan facing his addictions while portraying a role model for his students. Therefore, it can be surmised that Half Nelson is a classic tale of dialectics. Through the examination of this intense film, fundamental metaphors of communication ethics practice have been uncovered. The first is dialectics, a way of theorizing historical and cultural change, which Dan uses to reach his uninterested students, particularly in demonstrations and depictions of the powerful collision of two opposing forces throughout history. The second metaphor is captured on the title of the film, Half Nelson, a grappling hold in wrestling that is executed from the backside of the opponent using one hand. Addiction is indeed pinning Dan to the mat, but he is not yet completely debilitated by it. Both Dre and Dan are at a crossroads in their lives. Dre is searching for moral guidance and emotional connection, while Dan must find a way to kick the habits of disillusionment and rationalization. An intrinsic humanism can be found in all art forms, regardless of whether the medium be film, literature, music, sketch, paint, and so on. The great power to communicate, to express things that can't be easily communicated in other ways, can be done purely through art. Art allows us to share experiences that go deep into the human spirit and psyche, in the same places where pain, indifferentness, or isolation often take us. This critical perspective to maintain that is based on the dialogic of communication ethics. After all, a dialogic ethic is the protector and promoter of the emergent and unexpected, and the unforeseen. It is the communicative home of hope.